she approved every single decision. Those 5 words came out of Randall's mouth like he'd been practicing them all morning. Maybe he had. The room had 50 people in it, 50 department heads from every corner of the company. I was sitting 3 rows back, trying to make myself smaller, even though I'm 5'9". The board member asking the questions was an older woman with gray hair pulled back tight. She looked at me when he said it. Everyone did. I felt my chest get heavy, but I kept breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth, just like I'd taught myself to do during panic attacks. She approved this? The board member asked again. Randall nodded. He had this look on his face like he was disappointed in me, like I was a kid who'd broken something valuable and he had no choice but to tell my parents. Every step of the way, he said. I brought up concerns multiple times, but she was adamant. She really believed in this expansion. That's when my whole body started shaking. Not fear. Something else. Something I didn't have a name for yet. Let me back up. My name is Cleo. 3 years ago, I got hired as Deputy Director of Operations for a mid-size import company, the kind that brings in goods from 12 different countries and distributes them regionally. Nothing glamorous. Most people wouldn't even understand what we do if I explained it. But it's steady work, good pay, health benefits. Randall had been the director for 8 years before I arrived. Everyone talked about him like he was some kind of miracle worker. Turned the division around, increased profits by 40%, built relationships overseas that nobody else could manage. My first day, he shook my hand and said, I need someone who can handle the details while I focus on the big picture. Think you can do that? I said yes, because that's what you say in those situations. What he meant was, I need someone to do my job while I take the credit. I'd show up every morning at 6. The building would be empty, except for the security guard, who'd nod at me as I walked to the elevator. I'd make the climb to the 7th floor and spend the next 3 hours going through reports, preparing briefings, analyzing data from our international partners. Randall would arrive at 9 or sometimes 9:30. He'd walk past my workspace without saying hello. 30 minutes later, he'd buzz me into his office. I'd hand him everything I'd prepared. He'd flip through it for maybe 90 seconds. Then he'd wave his hand. Good. I'll take it from here. That meant, get out. At 10, he'd be in meetings presenting my work, my analysis, my solutions. Everyone would nod and smile and tell him how brilliant he was. I'd sit in the back if I was even invited to those meetings at all. For 2 years, I told myself this was normal. This was how things worked. You pay your dues. You wait your turn. Eventually, people notice. But they don't notice. Not when someone like Randall is good at making himself look indispensable. Then last March, something changed. The company wanted to expand into Southeast Asia, 3 new countries. Direct distribution instead of going through local partners. It was a massive undertaking. Potentially massive profits too, but only if everything went right. Randall called me into his office on a Tuesday morning. We're doing this, he said, no question in his voice. I need you to run the preliminary analysis. I spent 2 weeks on it. I looked at everything. Market conditions, regulatory requirements, currency fluctuations, local competition, infrastructure challenges. I built projections for best case, worst case, and realistic scenarios. The numbers didn't look good. Best case, we'd break even in 18 months. Realistic scenario, we'd lose money for 3 years before seeing any profit. Worst case, we'd hemorrhage cash until someone pulled the plug. I brought my findings to Randall on a Thursday afternoon. He was eating lunch at his desk when I walked in. Some kind of sandwich with extra everything. So? He said with his mouth half full. It's not viable, I told him. Not with our current infrastructure. We'd need to build entirely new distribution networks, hire local staff, navigate regulations that change every 6 months. The risk is too high. He swallowed, took a sip of his drink. You're being paranoid. I'm being realistic. Realistic, he repeated, like the word tasted bad. You know what realistic gets you? A comfortable middle position where nothing ever changes. I didn't get where I am by being realistic. Where you are. I said it before I could stop myself. His head snapped up. Excuse me? I should have backed down. Should have apologized. Should have walked out. Instead, I said, just that we should consider all the factors before committing. I've already committed, he said. The board loves this. They're expecting big things. So unless you have something useful to contribute, I suggest you figure out how to make this work instead of finding reasons why it won't. I left his office feeling like I'd swallowed glass. 2 weeks later, I tried again. I'd refined my analysis, found even more red flags. Currency instability in 2 of the target countries, new tariff regulations, existing competitors who'd already cornered the market. I caught Randall in the hallway outside the break room. I need 5 minutes, I said. He glanced at his watch. Walk with me. We walked. I talked. I showed him the updated numbers on my tablet as we moved through the building. Stop being a coward, he said when I finished. This is happening whether you like it or not. Then he walked away. The expansion launched in April. By June, we were already seeing problems. Shipments delayed, local staff quitting, unexpected costs piling up faster than anyone predicted. By August, we'd lost 4 million. By November, it was 8 million. By December, we hit 8.9 million in losses, and the board demanded answers. That's how we ended up in that room. 50 department heads, the board asking questions, Randall pointing at me. She approved every single decision. I sat there shaking. Nobody was looking at me anymore. They were all watching him explain how he'd tried to stop this disaster, but I'd been so insistent, so confident, so absolutely certain it would work. I trusted her judgment, he said. His voice had this sad quality to it, like he was confessing a mistake. She'd been performing well. I thought maybe she saw something I didn't. Clearly, I was wrong. The board member wrote something on her notepad. And you have documentation of these concerns you raised? Of course, Randall said smoothly. That's when something broke inside me. Not broke, transformed. I stood up. The movement must have surprised everyone because the whole room seemed to shift. People turning, whispers starting and stopping. Randall looked at me. For half a second, I saw something in his expression. Fear, maybe. Or just surprise that I wasn't sitting there taking it quietly. Cleo, he said. This isn't the time. My voice came out quieter than I wanted. Check your own emails. Silence. What? He said. Check your own emails. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. He laughed. Actually laughed. I think the stress of this situation has gotten to you. Maybe you should step outside. I started walking. Not toward the exit. Toward the front of the room. Toward him. Then show them, I said. Show them the thread from last March. His smile faded. Show them where I outlined 15 separate reasons this expansion would fail. Show them where you replied. Show them what you told me to do when I brought you updated numbers 2 weeks later. Before I continue further, I want to say thank you for listening to this. I know there are thousands of stories out there you could be hearing right now, but you chose this one. That means something to me. If you're listening while driving, while working, while doing whatever it is you do, I appreciate you being here. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to know. Now, back to the story. Randall's face had changed. The confident look was gone. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I have nothing to hide, he finally said, but his voice cracked on the word hide. The board member leaned forward. Mr. Randall, is there correspondence we should review? She's lying, he said. But something else was happening. Someone else was moving. Ingrid, Randall's assistant. She'd been sitting in the first row this whole time. I'd barely noticed her before. She was 40-something with brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Always quiet. Always in the background. She'd worked for Randall for 6 years. She stood up, and she was crying. Not the kind of crying you do at sad movies. The kind that comes from somewhere deep. From years of holding something in. Everyone was staring at her now. Even Randall. Ingrid, he said. What are you doing? She wiped her face with the back of her hand, but the tears kept coming. I'm done. Done with what? With this? With you? With all of it. Randall's jaw tightened. Sit down. You're making a scene. A scene? Her voice went up. A scene? You just blamed her for something you did. Something I watched you do. Something I've watched you do for 6 years. The board member's pen stopped moving. Miss, perhaps you should explain what you mean. Ingrid turned to face her. He deletes things. Messages. Memos. Anything that makes him look bad. He's been doing it since I started working for him. When someone below him has a good idea, he takes it. When something goes wrong, he finds someone else to blame. This isn't the first time. That's enough, Randall said sharply. No, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. I was still standing there, My legs felt like they might give out, but I stayed upright. This woman I'd barely spoken to was fighting my battle for me. The board member stood up. Mr. Randall, I think we need to take a closer look at the communications surrounding this expansion. There's nothing to look at, he said. My assistant is clearly upset about something personal. This has nothing to do with— I forwarded everything this morning, Ingrid said. She wasn't crying anymore. Her voice had gone steady, firm. Every message, every memo, 6 years of material. I sent it to the board secretary at 7:15 this morning. The room changed. You could feel it, like air pressure dropping before a storm. Randall went very still. You did what? Everything, she repeated. The messages you deleted, the ideas you stole from junior staff, the times you blamed other people for your mistakes. All of it. You had no right. I had every right. I've been complicit for too long. He looked at me, then at Ingrid, then at the board member. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I'd never seen him speechless before, never seen him without a quick answer or a smooth explanation. The board member gathered her papers. This meeting is over. Mr. Randall, you'll need to come with me. The rest of you are dismissed. People started standing up, whispering to each other, shooting glances at Randall, at me, at Ingrid. The room emptied slowly, everyone trying to act normal, while clearly desperate to get out and start spreading what they'd just witnessed. I stood there until almost everyone was gone. Ingrid was still there too, sitting back down in the first row. She looked exhausted. I walked over to her. Why did you do that? She looked up at me. Because I should have done it years ago. But your job? I know. She took off her glasses and cleaned them on her shirt. I know what this means, but I couldn't watch it happen again. I've seen him do this to 4 other people. 4. They all left quietly, took the blame, moved on. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that I was just an assistant, that speaking up would cost me everything. It might, I said honestly. Maybe. But staying quiet was costing me something too. Something I couldn't get back. We sat there for a minute without talking. The room felt bigger now that everyone had left. Emptier. Thank you, I said. She nodded. Don't thank me yet. This isn't over. She was right. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I went to work each morning not knowing if I still had a job. Randall didn't come in. Nobody said anything official. People would walk past my workspace and either avoid looking at me or stare too long. Both felt terrible. On the second day, someone from Human Resources called me into their office. A woman named Paulette, with short blonde hair and a tablet she kept looking at. We're conducting an internal review, she said. Until that's complete, we need you to refrain from discussing the incident with other staff members. Am I being investigated? I asked. Everyone involved is being interviewed. It's standard procedure. Am I going to lose my job? She looked at me for a long moment. I don't know. I went home that night and couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just sat on my couch staring at nothing. 3 years of my life, 3 years of arriving early and staying late and doing everything right. And it might all disappear because I'd finally stood up for myself. My phone buzzed around 11. A text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Ingrid. Got your number from the staff directory. Just wanted to check if you're okay. I stared at the message, typed and deleted 3 different responses. Finally settled on, I don't know. Are you okay? Not really, but I'm glad I did it. Did they interview you? For 3 hours. They asked about everything. I told them everything. Do you regret it? The typing indicator appeared and disappeared twice before her response came through. No, I should have done it sooner. On the 3rd day, I got called into a different office. Bigger, higher floor. The kind of office where important decisions get made. 3 board members were waiting. The woman with gray hair from before, plus 2 men I'd seen around but never spoken to. Sit down, Cleo, the woman said. I sat. We've completed our initial review of the communications provided by Ingrid Hale and several other staff members who came forward after the meeting. We've also reviewed internal records and conducted multiple interviews. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The findings are troubling. There's a clear pattern of behavior spanning several years. Misappropriation of credit, deletion of communications, misrepresentation of facts. This expansion failure was not an isolated incident. It was the culmination of systemic problems in leadership. One of the men leaned forward. We owe you an apology. You were blamed for something that was not your fault. In fact, Your analysis was correct. Had it been properly considered, we could have avoided significant losses. The woman continued. Randall has been placed on indefinite administrative leave pending further review. Given the severity of the findings, it's unlikely he'll return to the company in any capacity. I tried to process what she was saying, tried to feel something, relief, vindication, anything, but I just felt numb. What about me? I asked. What about you? Do I still have a job? The woman smiled. Not a big smile, just a small one. Yes. The question is what job? I don't understand. The director position is vacant. You have the experience, the knowledge, the integrity we're looking for. If you're interested, we'd like to offer you the role. My mind went blank, completely blank, like someone had pressed a reset button. You want me to take his position? We want you to rebuild this division properly, with transparency, with competence, the way it should have been run all along. I thought about it, thought about walking into that office every day, sitting where he sat, undoing everything he'd done wrong. No, I said. All three of them looked surprised. No? The woman repeated. I don't want his position. I don't want his office. I don't want to stay in a place that reminds me of him every single day. Then what do you want? I hadn't planned this, hadn't rehearsed it, but suddenly I knew exactly what I wanted. The international division, the one he destroyed. Let me go there. That's a disaster zone, one of the men said. We're probably going to shut it down entirely. Don't. Give me 2 years. Let me try to fix it. It's a demotion, the woman said. Less pay, less prestige, smaller team. Why would you choose that? Because I want to fix something broken instead of just sitting in a comfortable position pretending I won something. They looked at each other, some kind of silent communication happening between them. 2 years, the woman finally said. If you can stabilize it, we'll reconsider the shutdown. If not, we close it down and you'll have to accept another position in the company. Deal. We shook hands. I walked out feeling lighter than I had in 3 years. Ingrid was waiting in the hallway when I came out. She stood up from the bench she'd been sitting on. How'd it go? She asked. They offered me his job. Her eyes widened. Really? I said no. Why? Because I didn't want it. I took something else instead. She smiled. Good. You shouldn't want to be anything like him. What about you? I asked. What happened? They want me to transfer to legal, help them with the investigation, make sure everything is properly handled. It's more money, better hours. I said yes. That's good. It's terrifying, but good. We walked to the elevator together, going down, going somewhere else, going forward. Can I ask you something? I said as we descended. Sure. Why didn't you come forward before the meeting, before all of this? She was quiet for a long time. The elevator passed 3 floors before she answered, because I was scared, and because I kept telling myself it wasn't my responsibility, that if the people he hurt didn't speak up, why should I? But watching him blame you like that, watching you stand up when everyone else would have stayed seated, I realized I'd been lying to myself. It was my responsibility. It had always been my responsibility. I just didn't want to admit it. The elevator doors opened. We stepped out into the lobby. Well, I said, thank you for finally admitting it. Thank you for standing up. I needed to see someone do it first. We walked out of the building together. The sun was bright, too bright. I had to squint. My phone buzzed. Another message. This one from a name I recognized. Trevor. He'd been on my team for 2 years. Quiet guy. Good at his job. Heard what happened. Just wanted to say you did the right thing. A lot of us have been waiting for someone to finally stand up to him. Glad it was you. 3 more messages came in over the next hour, all from people I worked with, all saying similar things. Apparently, Randall had been worse than I realized. The stories people started sharing were worse than anything I'd experienced. I started my new role 3 weeks later. The international division was housed in a smaller building across town. When I walked in on my first day, the place felt abandoned. Half the workspaces were empty. The people who were still there looked defeated, like they were just waiting for someone to tell them it was officially over. There were 11 people left, 11 out of what used to be 40. I gathered them in the main work area. No fancy meeting room, just everyone standing around in a circle. I'm Cleo, I said. I know most of you probably heard what happened with Randall. I know this division has been struggling. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers. but I'm here to try. If you want to try with me, I'd appreciate it. If you want to leave, I understand. No hard feelings. Nobody said anything for a minute. Then a younger guy with dark curly hair raised his hand slightly. Are they shutting us down? Not for 2 years. That's how long I asked for. And after that, we'll see. If we can stabilize things, maybe we continue. If not, at least we tried. A woman with red hair tied back in a ponytail spoke up. What's your plan? I don't have one yet. That's why I need your help. You've been living this disaster. You know what went wrong. Tell me. Over the next 6 hours, they told me everything. And I mean everything. The expansion had been even worse than I realized. Randall had cut corners everywhere, hired the cheapest local staff without proper training, ignored regulatory requirements that seemed complicated, made promises to overseas partners he had no intention of keeping. He just wanted the launch to look good, the curly-haired guy said. His name was Brett. Didn't matter if it actually worked, just had to look impressive in the quarterly report. The woman with red hair was named Simone. She'd been managing the Southeast Asia operations before they collapsed. We were getting warnings from day one: infrastructure problems, cultural misunderstandings, local competitors undercutting us. I sent reports every week. He never responded. Not once. I listened, took notes in a regular notebook with a regular pen, asked questions when I didn't understand something. These people had been ignored for months. The least I could do was pay attention. By the end of that first day, I had a clearer picture. The expansion wasn't just poorly planned. It was doomed from the start because nobody in charge had bothered to listen to the people actually doing the work. Here's what we're going to do, I said as we were wrapping up. We're going to stop pretending we can maintain operations in all 3 countries. We don't have the resources. We don't have the infrastructure. We need to focus. On what? Brett asked. I don't know yet, but we're going to figure it out together. Over the next 3 months, we systematically pulled back from 2 of the 3 countries. It was painful. We had to terminate relationships, disappoint partners, admit we'd made mistakes. But it was necessary. The one country we kept was the smallest of the 3, a place where we actually had decent local relationships, where the regulations were somewhat stable, where we might actually have a chance. Simone took lead on rebuilding those relationships. She was good at it, better than good. She understood how to communicate across cultures without being condescending or making assumptions. Brett focused on logistics, figuring out the actual costs, the real timelines, not the fantasy versions Randall had presented to the board. I spent most of my time in meetings I hated, meetings with creditors, with regulators, with angry partners who felt betrayed, apologizing, explaining, promising to do better. It was humbling work, the kind that doesn't look impressive on paper, but slowly, things started to stabilize. By month 6, we'd stopped hemorrhaging money. We weren't making profit, but we weren't losing millions anymore either. By month 9, we landed a small contract. Nothing major, but it was something. Proof we could actually deliver what we promised. By month 12, we'd hired 3 new people. Young, hungry, willing to work for a division everyone else thought was dying. I was working late one night when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was after 9, but the number looked familiar. Hello? Cleo? It's Ingrid. Hey, how are you? Good. Busy. The legal work is intense, but I'm calling because I thought you should know something. Okay. Randall filed a lawsuit. My stomach dropped. Against who? The company. He's claiming wrongful termination, defamation, a bunch of other things. His lawyers are saying the internal investigation was biased. Can he win? No. The evidence is overwhelming, but it's going to be messy. They'll probably try to depose you. Maybe me. Anyone who was involved. When? Could be months. Could be a year. These things take time. I sat there staring at my workspace, at the stacks of reports I'd been reviewing, at the half-empty mug of tea that had gone lukewarm hours ago. Are you worried? Ingrid asked. I don't know. Should I be? No, but it won't be fun. His lawyers will try to make you look incompetent, try to prove he was right all along, that you really were responsible for the losses. Let them try. That's the spirit. We talked for a few more minutes. She told me about her new position, about how strange it felt to be respected instead of invisible, about how she was sleeping better than she had in years. After we hung up, I sat there thinking, Randall wasn't gone. Not really. He was still out there, still fighting, still trying to rewrite what had happened. But I wasn't the same person who'd sat in that meeting room shaking. I'd spent a year rebuilding something he'd destroyed, learning what real leadership looked like, understanding that success wasn't about looking good in reports. It was about doing the actual work. The deposition happened 14 months after everything started. I sat in a small room with Randall's lawyer, a man in his 50s with expensive clothes and an aggressive tone. He spent 4 hours trying to trip me up, asking the same questions different ways, suggesting I'd manipulated Ingrid into lying, implying I'd somehow sabotaged the expansion to make Randall look bad. "Isn't it true," he said at one point, "that you were jealous of Mr. Randall's position?" "No. You never wanted his job?" "They offered it to me." I said no, but only after you'd successfully gotten him removed. "I didn't get him removed. His own actions did that. According to you. According to 6 years of patterns. According to multiple staff members who came forward. According to the messages he thought he'd deleted, but couldn't actually delete because our system keeps archives." He didn't like that answer. Changed tactics. Started asking about my qualifications, my experience, suggesting I wasn't capable of analyzing complex international operations. "Yet I'm currently running the international division," I said, "the one he destroyed. And it's operational. Not profitable yet, but stable. Which is more than it was under his leadership. You call losing 8.9 million stable? I call stopping the losses and rebuilding relationships stable. Yes." The deposition ended. I went back to work. The lawsuit dragged on for another 8 months. Randall's lawyers kept filing motions, requesting more information, trying to delay, but eventually, it went to mediation. I wasn't there for that part, but Ingrid told me what happened. Randall showed up thinking he had leverage, thinking the company would settle just to avoid bad publicity. His lawyers had probably told him he'd get a payout, maybe even a letter of recommendation, a quiet exit that would let him save face. Instead, the company's lawyers presented everything: 6 years of documented misconduct, testimony from 14 current and former staff members, the archived messages showing exactly what he'd said and done, the financial analysis proving his decisions had caused the losses, not mine. The mediator looked at Randall's lawyer and said, "You should advise your client to withdraw this lawsuit immediately." Randall refused. Said he'd take it to trial, make everyone's lives difficult, expose the company's internal problems publicly. So they did something I didn't expect. They filed a countersuit for the losses, for the damage to the company's reputation, for the cost of the investigation and the legal fees and everything else that had resulted from his actions. $8.9 million plus additional damages. Randall's lawyer withdrew from the case a week later. Professional disagreement, the filing said, which usually means the client was being unreasonable or couldn't pay. The lawsuit fell apart after that. Randall tried to represent himself for a while, filed bizarre motions that got rejected. Eventually, the whole thing was dismissed with prejudice, meaning he couldn't file again, but the countersuit remained. I heard through the company grapevine that Randall had to sell his house, that he was working some small job trying to pay off the debt, that none of his old professional contacts would return his messages. His reputation was gone. His career was over. His entire life had unwound because he'd tried to blame someone else for his own mistakes. I should have felt satisfied, maybe even happy, but mostly I just felt tired. 2 years after I'd started with the international division, I was sitting in the same office where they'd offered me Randall's position. Same 3 board members. "You've exceeded expectations," the woman with gray hair said. "The division is operating at a modest profit. You've rebuilt relationships we thought were permanently damaged. You've created a sustainable model. We still have work to do," I said. "Always. But you've proven it's possible. We're making the division permanent. No more threat of shutdown." One of the men leaned forward. "We'd also like to expand your authority, give you oversight of the entire operations department. It's a significant promotion. More people, bigger budget, much higher salary," the other man added. I thought about what that would mean. More meetings, more politics, more time in places like this office, instead of actually doing the work. "Can I think about it?" I asked. They looked surprised but nodded. I walked out of that building and called Ingrid. "They want to promote me again," I told her. "That's great. Is it? You don't sound excited. I'm not sure I want it. I like what I'm doing now. I like working with a small team on something real. If I take this promotion, I become what he was. Someone who manages instead of leads. Someone who presents other people's work instead of doing the actual work. Then don't take it. Everyone else thinks I should. Everyone else isn't living your life. I hung up and went home. Spent the evening thinking, not about what I should do, about what I actually wanted. The next morning, I went back to that office. I appreciate the offer, I told them, but I'm going to stay where I am. You're turning down a promotion? One of the men asked. I'm choosing to keep doing work I care about instead of climbing higher just because I can. The woman with gray hair smiled. Fair enough. The offer stands if you change your mind. I never changed my mind. 3 years after everything started, I was still running the international division, still working with my small team, still fixing problems instead of managing people who fix problems. Randall never contacted me, never apologized, never acknowledged what he'd done. I heard he moved to a different city, started over somewhere nobody knew his name. Sometimes people ask me if I got revenge. If I feel like I won, I tell them the truth. I didn't get revenge. I just refused to accept blame for something I didn't do. Ingrid was the one who brought everything into the light. The board was the one who took action. Randall destroyed himself by being exactly who he'd always been. All I did was stand up and say 5 words. Check your own emails. That's it. That's the whole story. And before I go, I want to thank you for sticking with me through all of this. If you found something valuable here, something that resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me what you thought. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. It helps more than you know. Thanks for listening.